Are we here? I am here. Are you here? I am still coming to you from the ranch in California for, I think, the second to the last week. This is the penultimate week. I know this has been going on forever. It's like, Wendy from Guelph, numero uno. Guelph, numero uno. Ichiban. Woo-woo! Wendy, I commend you.
Wendy's the most famous person in the gathering room.
You are. You're like the fulcrum of the gathering. There's Donna. Ha. Wendy from Guelph beat you in, Donna. You said you were going to come in first, and sorry, once more a bridesmaid. Hello from New Mexico and Calgary and LA and Pennsylvania and Melbourne. Woo! Yeah. And all the other places. Is it cold in Australia? It is not cold here. Hi, Rachel from Pennsylvania. Hi, Tricia. Mwah. Love to you too up there in Alaska. In Vancouver and Edmonton and Texas and Florida. I love the way we hang out. Monterey, Minnesota. Abu Dhabi. Woo! All the way across the many oceans. Culver City, California, right in our neighborhood. Oh, it is very cold in Australia. Well, that will we'll have to take that into account for today's discussion. Who's that? How does Wendy do it? The Guelph. I think Guelph, Wendy from Guelph is like a superhero. I think there will be tales told of Wendy from Guelph down through the ages. Yeah, it is. It's supersonic. Okay, we've got over 100 people here. So what I want to talk to you about is a really weird phenomenon that I've been told. You know, there's something called a sociological imagination, which when I was at Harvard, they were very emphatic about teaching the social scientists there to have a sociological imagination, which means you look at everything in big patterns of how people and cultures move instead of just looking at sort of an isolated view. And one of the things that you see in the sociological viewpoint is that August in the Northern Hemisphere is like dead zone. There's another dead zone in February. I once went to my freshman year at Harvard. I went to the psychiatrist at the Harvard Health Center because I was depressed. And I was like, "Aah!" And he's like, "You're fine. It's February in Massachusetts. We all feel that way." So that's a different kind of dead zone. But August is interesting in that nothing really happens in August. And it's true that, for example, in farming, that's when the crops are growing well. You're not really weeding, things are planting them, but you're not quite harvesting them. The reason our kids get out, and well, colleges too, for summer vacations are all about farming and the way that you have to just tend the fields in August. But as a result, everything else stopped. And so school stops, obviously, in the summer. But everything goes quiet. In book publishing, they would say, do not try to sell a book in August. It'll just tank. I had people tell me when I was doing I used to be on this little news spot in Phoenix on the local news there. And in August, they were just scratching for news stories, like nothing was happening. And it was every August. I did it for years. And every August, people would say, nothing's happening. I have to make up like a human interest story because there's no news. We actually had a news story once called Dog Almost Gets Sick. that is a slow news day. And if nothing worse than that is happening, we're all lucky. But there's also this kind of, we come from a culture that's like, go, and do productive things. So in August, I always try to do productive things, and it's like trying to wade through a swamp. That reminds me, I saw this thing online, brave man wades into swamp to rescue puppy. Only I read it for some reason as brave man waddles into swamp to rescue puppy, and it changed the whole thing. I feel like I'm waddling through the swamp in August. It's just like, ugh. So what I've been doing, of course, is watching documentaries about people who got a lot done. Specifically, our founding fathers. because we're moving to Pennsylvania and that's where it all happened. But then a lot of the Civil War happened in Pennsylvania too, like Gettysburg. So I've been watching Ken Burns' documentary on the Civil War as well. And it's given me several deep gifts that I wish to pass on to you. The first one is probably the best euphemistic curse that I've ever heard. There was a woman who was a nurse for the Southern Army in the Civil War, and her name was, I don't remember her first name, but her last name was Bickerdike. And she was so brilliant at taking care of the soldiers that they called her Mother Bickerdike. And I just think every time something goes wrong for me, since I heard that, I just go, Mother Bickerdike! And it feels really good, but I can say it in front of children. So that's one gift of the Civil War to us here today. Another thing is that as I'm watching stuff, like I watched John Adams, about John Adams, you'll never guess, which is also about all the founding fathers and how they revolted against England and put together a whole government and did all the things, right? And what you notice when you watch this stuff is that they were moving at an absolute snail's pace compared to anything we do these days. Plus, they were feeling like hammered crack while they did it. I mean, there's Benjamin Franklin, one of our forefathers, right? He did all these experiments. He was like limping around. He had gout. He could barely see. They all had crappy teeth. They were like, you get a cold in those days, it lasts 12 months. My tech person is worried about something.
People are concerned about the sound, but we're just using.
Can you hear me better now? Can you hear me better now? Well,
They can make.
I hope you can understand this. Maybe we can get some, oh lordy, someone says. Maybe we can get some subtitles put on it at a later date. I'm really sorry. Our broadcasting stuff seems to be working okay here. Oh, so sorry that you can't hear me better. Anyway, yeah, somebody reminded me. Moving at a snail's pace, feeling like hammered crack. I put before you the phenomenon of August. Like, we meet, we talk, you can barely hear. It feels like waddling through a swamp. Like everything is hard to move. Everything goes slowly. Wendy Powell in Guelph says, it sounds okay. Wendy, you are the superhero of Gathering Room. It is left to you to write down everything I say and mail it, snail mail by mule train to everyone in the Gathering Room, including people in Sydney and Melbourne and Abu Dhabi. I'm glad you can hear me. Okay, my point is, if you feel like you're not getting enough done, don't feel that way. All anybody ever did was crawl along at a snail's pace. And in August, it doesn't go as well. Now, for those of you on the Southern Hemisphere, you may be quite cold. You may be in what is for us the February slump, where, which is what the Harvard psychiatrist told me, just shows up as a month-long depression. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you're going to have this heat thing, but in the Southern Hemisphere, it happens in what we call the winter months. So you're sitting there at Christmas time, dying of heat, sipping white wine with ice, and that's your August in terms of this particular metaphor, okay? But actually, most of our lives feel like August. Most of our lives feel like we're kind of creeping forward, getting a little done, sliding back. Oh, now I don't feel good enough to do anything. People who did great things did them that way. When you were feeling well enough from your gout and your head cold that lasted a year, you had to go out and stab a goose, take its feathers, make it into a quill pen, stick it in your own blood, and write a poem or something. I mean, it's not an easy planet. That's what I am trying to express to you people. Mother Bickerdike! I wish it were easier, but it's not. So Carol Waddle says, yeah, even a snail's pace leaves a trail. So today, here I have come to actually a point. I was noticing how as we pack up our house for everything to go away, There are certain things that I over purchase, like L-lysine, which is what it's an amino acid you take when you've got cold sores. Every now and again I buy one because I don't think we have enough L-lysine in case of an emergency. So as we packed our whole house, I realized we had this vast stockpile of L-lysine. And it was accumulated in drips and drabs over not that long a time, 5 or 6 years. But there's a lot of it. So what I want to encourage us to do today is take a little tiptoe forward if you feel like it. But if you feel overwhelmed by August, just stop and fan yourself and call upon Mother Bickerdike and the founding fathers to motivate you maybe later in the day to do a small thing. We talked about turtle steps already once. This is about feeling like you're taking turtle steps but sliding backwards. If you just show up and do a gram of something every day, if you just do one good thing a day, it starts to accumulate. It starts to accumulate faster than you think it will. It looks little to begin with, and then you look behind you after a few years and it's vast. So people think that somehow I became a successful writer by some act of discipline. My gosh, people, it was all August. It was all write a page, spend 6 hours questioning my ability to even speak English, let alone write it, going into a week-long slump, then coming out of it, writing another page. I mean, it was crawling through August a lot of the time. And then sometimes I get a book contract and I have to crawl really fast through August. And I think the quality of this is so disgusting that people will pay me not to publish it. But instead, people read the books and y'all are here. So I guess what I'm saying is do what little you can under the worst circumstances. Show up halfway and do half as well as you can, and you will still create something important. You can still create revolutions. You can create new forms of being. You can create government by the people, of the people, and for the people. Bit by tiny bit, you're building something fantastic. And it's in hindsight that we look back and say, wow, that happened fast. That must have been easy. Nope. It was just August. So I'm opening the floor for questions. If any of you have the energy to type them. Rachel says, how can we regulate our pace when everyone around us is rushing and trying to speed up? What's funny is all the rushing doesn't actually go very fast. It's like hamster wheels. People are moving faster, but they're not getting anywhere faster. You know what I mean? Like there is a tremendous amount of, in my industry, there are books published from here to the next galaxy. There are millions of books published every year, and yet it's kind of rare to find one of those gems that you read the first few pages and you're like, oh yum, I'm on a good ride, and you just curl up with a great book. Out of those millions of books being published, not very many of them actually get any traction. And I think the ones that do get traction are the ones that wait for the energy of action to feel authentic. And if it feels inauthentic to move forward, if it feels like a push, the faster you run, the more you stay the same. You're just in a hamster wheel. And then you'll get the energetic impulse to move, which I think has undulations literally in the energy of the planet. I really do think there are different energies at different times of the year as the sun is in different relationship to the earth. So the way to regulate it is to look for the authentic call to action. And whatever isn't authentic, just watch people go whizzing around, jumping up on their hamster wheels and telling you you're not doing enough. And notice that they're not actually doing a whole lot more than you. They're not accomplishing a whole lot more than you are. And then when you get the impulse to act, what you do has the intelligence of life behind it, and it gives you a lot more traction. And you usually don't know it at the time. Donna says, how in August do you get through the paralyzing anxiety that comes with the belief that you're not doing enough, fast enough, or well enough? Man, you guys, I just read a book, I said this before, but it's a really good book given to me by my beloved friend Judy Clippen from South Africa, and it's called Affluence Without Abundance. It's really good. It's about the Khoisan the so-called Bushmen that live in the Kalahari of Africa and are closest to the ancient, like hundreds of thousands of year tradition of hunter-gatherers than probably any other population. And what's interesting is that the Khoisan could never be taken out of their way of life because they weren't interested in stockpiling anything. Their entire culture was based on trust that nature would give them what they needed. And it was a rhythm. When there were no plants, the animals were easy to hunt and they could eat meat. When the plants did well and the animals were scarcer, they could eat the plants. So they could always find some source of nourishment, and they trusted for hundreds of thousands of years. And then these people came along, these white farmers, who did not trust the earth, who tried to force huge amounts of productivity out of the earth and then stockpile more than they could eat in a few days. And the Bushmen were like, okay, that's insane, and it will make you sick in the head, and your life won't be happy. Like, why would you want to live like that? Life is about sitting around together, hanging out, like chewing the fat with your buddies and walking in the woods. It's like they were very explicit about it. They were very intelligent about it. And that really showed me that this whole addiction to doing is very Western, and it's very recent, and it really is, sorry to beat my sociological soapbox, it's really related to factory production. So the idea is related to two things: fear, the continuous fear that the world won't take care of us, and factory production. I have to tell you a little miracle story that happened to me today. So I had a stomach ulcer that developed for, I don't know why, but there it is. And I got up this morning and it didn't feel good, although I've been on antibiotics. And I thought, oh, well, I'm tired of doing this medical approach. I'm going to look up like home remedies. So I looked up a good doctor who said, here are some foods you can eat. And I'm like sitting there, I don't feel good. Karen and Rowan and Adam, my family, had been to the store. And then I looked up from my, I was watching on my computer this little video about what to eat. And this man said, if you want to like eliminate ulcers and keep them from coming back, what you should do is sip bone broth. Bone broth is like the best thing you can possibly give yourself, barring really expensive and detrimental medications. He said, just sip bone broth all day. It's like bandage on the wound. And I looked up, and there was Rowan unpacking these cartons of bone broth and pouring them into a pot and making exactly the kind of food that this video said I should eat. And I had just sat there going, it's August, I need, and someone provided for me exactly what I needed at exactly the right time. This is what the Bushmen trusted would always happen to them. And people who say they've had enlightenment experiences are similarly trusting. Byron Katie told me that when people told her, look, you have to have food or you just won't be okay. You have to have water or you'll die. She would say, you might be right. You may be right. And she would head off into the desert around Barstow, California to check. She wanted to know if she really needed to be afraid. And if so, what would it be like to be destroyed? She said she would just walk in a straight line through this scalding desert. It's like Death Valley out there. And she tried not to survive. And she said somebody always showed up with a canteen and an air-conditioned car and a ride back home. She said, you can't die before you're meant to die. And she said, out of those experiences came a very, very extensive, like deep, broad trust in life itself. And that is the antithesis of the you must work all the time vibe. And I say often, the universe doesn't reward us for being desperate and miserable. So when we work to try to feel better, that's not what we're supposed to do. So we don't get rewarded for it. It's just a hamster wheel. But when we lay back and go, oh, it's August, mother Bickerstaff, I don't feel good. Bickerdike, sorry, corrected by the fact check crew here. Mother Bickerdike, I feel like crap. And you surrender to it. Just what you need is given to you in just that moment, and you may not notice this happening because our culture trains us not to notice it, but I promise you, if you let go of everything today, it's a Sunday in August, for heaven's sake, people just relax. Watch if something doesn't come to you without any effort on your part that is meant to support and nourish you mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, in some way. It will come to you. How do I know? I don't. It's like they say in Battlestar Galactica, one character says, why do you know you can trust me? And the other guy says, I don't know. That's what trust is. So just try it. Try it and see. It's an August experiment. Steven says, what do you do when doing just a little bit doesn't scratch the surface with the amount of stuff you need to get done? Oh my God, this is literally the story of my life. I felt that way since I was 4. And I told you, one of my earliest memories is lying in bed the night before my 4th birthday going, oh my God, I'm so far behind. What have I been thinking? I've completely frittered away my time. Mother Baker Duck, I've got to get on the pony, and get things done. And that feeling's never gone away. And yet, Stephen, when I was violently ill and could barely move, somehow I got barely enough done. And when I've been full of energy and charging straight ahead and pulling multiple all-nighters and really on fire, I don't get a whole lot more done. So it's the weirdest thing. It's like, first of all, you redefine what needs to be done, which honestly is precious little for most of us. I understand, the fact that this question came from a dude, this is really, unless it's a woman named Steven. But I think that's really significant because I feel like there's a very heavy burden on men to support everyone, and women feel it too. Women feel that they need to care for everyone, and most of us are working to try to support our families. But the cultural pressure on men to be cogs in the great machine of industry is absolutely almost unimaginable. And so you are given this cultural lie about what you need to do. But honestly, I've rarely met a loving family who would prefer the men of their family to be out as cogs in a great machine, who would prefer that to having that person home with them and having less excess. You do need enough to get by, but people get by with amazingly low levels of work. The average hunter-gatherer society, the average individual in a hunter-gatherer society, which we used to think was like, oh, it's so hard, 4 hours of work every week, which is interesting because then in the late 20th century, we got the book, The 4-Hour Work Week by someone named Tim, I forget his last name, Ferris. Tim Ferris, fact checking department right here, called Rose Brain. But read that book, Stephen. Read that book, all of us. Reread The 4-Hour Work Week. This is a guy who just tricks the system and manages to make 4 hours a week pay for his life. And he's really good at it. He's somewhat devious, but he's really good. And I would encourage you to do that. Marcia says, will September be better? You know what? It really always is. There's something that picks up as I honestly think it's because of the length of the day or the temperature or something, but I watch the critters around my house. You're seeing deer and chipmunks and bears wandering past me in the background. They're everywhere, and they keep schedules. They have little routines. There's a brown bunny who hops out by our gate every single night when we go to take the dogs for a walk, and the dogs chase him every single night, and every single night he's waiting for them. He's always in that spot that day, and because I used to meditate outside, I saw the cycles of the animals. And there are times when they just go dormant, and they just lie there. The squirrels and the chipmunks lie flat like they're practicing area rugs because it feels cooler to them that way. And when the air starts to lose that midday heat, they pop up and start running around and doing stuff. They feel the urge to act and they do it. But when they don't feel the urge to act, they don't do a damn thing. And I really believe that is nature. So September, if better is defined as having more power to act, aggressively in the world, I think September will be better. If you can relax into August and enjoy crawling through August, waddling through the swamp, whatever, then it'll all be good. It'll all be good. Karen says, could we convert society to moving with the pace of nature, seeing as we're so hyper-connected with technology? That's a really interesting question. There are a couple of ways I could see it going sociologically. One is, we don't want to see this, but one would be a cataclysm. So Einstein said, I don't know how World War III will be fought, but I know that World War IV will be fought with rocks and sticks. What he was saying is we've got technology to a point where it could completely destroy itself and we have to start over from a state of nature. I think it's fairly realistic for someone who lived through the 20th century in Europe or here, but I would like to think that instead there will be an event that is enormous but not catastrophic. And this is my obsession with this so-called transformation of consciousness. I've believed in it since I was a little kid. I had no reason to think about it. I knew I was obsessed with the destruction of ecosystems. I knew I was obsessed with the healing of human minds and hearts. I didn't know how it all fit together, but I had this feeling that during my lifetime, I would be involved in a massive, massive shift in the way human beings act, in the way human beings think. And there are many pieces to that change, but probably the most important is losing the sense of the small, isolated, and terrified self, and gaining a sense of the oneness of all things. And the enlightened people tell us that when you're like that, you realize that the reason, for example, they might say the reason Roe brought me bone broth at exactly the moment a video told me that I needed bone broth is that one consciousness is moving through all of this, and it loves itself. All parts of the world are loving all other parts, and it's beyond our human calculation how suffering and atrocities can fit into that. But when you've had that kind of awakening, like Nelson Mandela seems to have had in prison, like, scattered geniuses have had, if that happened at a wide scale, then you would have people functioning much more like a beehive, where everybody automatically, they think that bees must be somewhat telepathic because they always know how to adjust to whatever their circumstances, and they adjust in great numbers. Now, 200,000 bees making the same decision about which egg will be turned into a queen and where the hive will be and how much honey they need versus how many bee eggs or whatever. Like, there is a connection between living things that is metaphorically demonstrated by a beehive. But if we lost the sense of being separate, which is what many enlightened people have defined as enlightenment itself, to lose the sense of a separate, endangered self and to become one with this vast, intelligent, infinitely loving energy. If that happened, yeah, everything would change. And I spend a lot of my time imagining what that would be. And I would love to hear what you guys think it would be. But I actually am crazy enough to believe it's going to happen in our lifetime. Yeah. So, one more. How do you manage the belief that your worth is tied to your function or your ability to work hard, and then the reality that you're so darn tired of working hard all the time? Well, I think the reality of being so darn tired of working is what is teaching us to let go. Any kind of suffering, including fatigue, discouragement, feeling in a slump, is trying to teach us something. And as I've said, our culture is really, really on the bizarre end of obsessive overwork in the history of humankind. So the darn tired working all the time is a big signal. It's trying to get our attention and say, stop it. Stop it. I was driving along in the car the other day thinking, I'm going to do all these things and I really don't want to. And something said to me, stop it. Like, lie down and watch Ken Burns' documentary, that's Civil War. You're going to love it. And I was like, but I have to eat so much. And the feeling said, I'm not saying it would be nice if you were to stop. I'm saying if you don't stop right now and have some fun and lie down in a cool place, things will not go as well. So if you think about work as doing hamster wheel style, then there's no way to reconcile it. But if you think of doing the way nature does, effortlessly and rhythmically and with these undulations, always, the wave of productivity, the wave of rest, the wave of life, the wave of death, the wave of sleep, the wave of awakening. If you function that way, then you'll start to feel the truth of how you're meant to work instead of the cultural story. And it's when you know the truth about yourself, despite anything anyone says around you, that's where your self-worth comes from. As long as you think your self-worth comes from working, you will always be desperate and frightened. When you know that your self-worth is not tied to continuous factory production, you'll find your real worth, which is the same worth as these beautiful trees outside my window, or as all those beautiful faces I see on my screen when you guys come up. It's the enjoyment of the abundance and preciousness of our being without so much doing. That's what August is for. So I'm going to close now because I'm a little over time, but I want to thank you all so much. I love you all. And just remember, when you get frustrated, just shout, "Mother, bigger knife," and go lie down. Mwah!